this.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Wow, that was loud. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Council and Committee for April the 17th, 2018. Chairman Columbus is away on municipal business today, so he won't be with us, and therefore you're stuck with the Vice Chairman. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised. And for those in attendance, I don't see too many members of the public. I'd ask that you ensure your phones are on silence. I'd also like to thank our camera volunteer, Judy Ann McCulley. Thank you, Judy Ann. And I don't know if there's any significance with this football up here and if there's any presentations, but I do know that Councillor Sonnenberg brought it, thinking that he'd go for a long pass, but he made it for our CAO, David Cribbs, who's a Lions fan, and I believe it's David's first anniversary with Norfolk County, so I guess that's a special event unto itself. I don't know about the Detroit Lions, though, but we'll go on to the approval of the agenda, and there are no changes to today's agenda. Could I have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Wells, seconded by Mayor Luke, to approve the agenda as printed and presented? All those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent items, and this is our tricky one, where if you want to speak to any one of the two consent items, we'll have to move them to the reports, I guess top of the reports. Is there anyone that wants one or the other moved? If not, then could I have a motion to Councillor Oliver moves and Mayor Luke seconds the consent items be received as information? Was that what the motion is? Yeah. Those in favor and opposed? That's carried. And no communications, presentations, or closed sessions at this time or deputations. So we're going to move directly to item 9, staff reports. And the first staff report is FS 1816, December 31st, 2017 capital status report. And James, did you have anything to say about this?
The first thing I'd like to say is that my manager that's presenting the report is not here yet. So if we could perhaps go on.
So are you suggesting that we go on to the second? And let's just put this on hold for a couple of moments and go to staff report DCS 1850, civic address by, Chris isn't here either?
Also dealing with the Hastings
Do you
thing.
want to start with,
Why don't we start with Cab?
we'll start with David's, it's his first CAO.
Which one's that?
It's that one right there. And then
Okay.
you can do mine.
Whoops. Oh, boy. Is that it? What? This thing here. Which one is it?
Yep, just this one right here.
This one here?
Yep, 1815.
Okay, we're going to deal with the E, staff report CAO, Chief Administrative Officer 18-15. It's the CAB 2 renovation and usage report. David.
Thank you, sir. Council, good afternoon. You have before you a report that was conjunctively written by a reasonably large number of staff involved in this analysis. We have an opportunity to make, or a potential opportunity to make good use of the CAB 2 property, which is the building on the southeast corner of this facility, to really to revitalize both the property and to do our own sort of little step as far as downtown revitalization goes. The building currently sits vacant. It has been vacant for roughly 2 years, a little bit more than that now. In that time, at present, the CAB 2 facility is not in the county's 10-year capital plan, which is to say there are no current or medium-term plans to utilize the property. There are some prospective interested tenants who have obviously some sort of close connection and affiliation with the county and with the community more generally and more importantly. But beyond that, there is the potential use of the space as staff office space or in the alternative as a simple commercial transaction with a commercial tenant as we do with the other building on the property. At any rate, staff estimate it'll take a little over $70,000 to bring the building up to sort of Class B office standard, which is to say attractive-looking premises with modern finishes. That money, there's a table in the report showing roughly how long it would take to recoup that cost, appreciating that the opportunity cost for council is $5,900 a year, which is to say that's how much money we spend providing security, heat, etc. to the building, insurance, to keep it vacant. So over the next 10 years, it'll cost the county roughly $60,000 in today's dollars to keep it vacant. In light of that, we're looking at a roughly $72,000 repair bill. On top of that, if council were interested, it would be technically feasible to create a ramp to provide accessibility access to the back of the building. That we estimate at $17,000. That's not included in the 72. So that's another potential 17 on top. But with those monies, with either number, we believe there's a potential to occupy that space and bring more employment and jobs to the downtown area in a high-profile, attractive location, which we hope would be beneficial to the community as a whole. That's the overview. Myself and several other staff members are happy to take questions, as the case may be. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, Councillor Wells? I see your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, and when we talk about revitalizing, be part of revitalizing downtown, Simcoe, which is a good thing, but we're looking at a cost of somewhere around $90,000. Am I correct on that, roughly?
That would be the upper end, yes, sir.
Yeah. And if we upgrade the facility, are we looking at market, probably rent for that facility, or are we looking at less than market rent?
There is a table contained within the report showing different rents that are within the reasonable range. We did receive independent appraisal indicating to us what appropriate rents are in the downtown core for comparable quality office space. although I note this one's somewhat unique. So I wouldn't want to give away too much of our negotiating position. As the report indicates, there is some interest from the BIA and the Chamber. The BIA, of course, has some degree of relationship directly with the county because of its role and the legislation. So there's that sort of arm's length, but not entirely. Of course, there's an option in there to go to market and to simply try to rent it as any other commercial landlord would. And alternatively, there would be any number of takers from a staff perspective were a council's decision to renovate it for use by county staff. So there are at least three different, conceptually different options before council. And we're looking for some guidance in that way. But I can't tell you exactly how much. The table does indicate what the payback period is. There is some flexibility as far as negotiation goes. And of course, I wouldn't want to negotiate in public. But there is a reasonable payback period.
Well, Mr. Chair, I was not trying to nitpick in terms of exactly what it is that we intend to do, but I think what I heard is there are many options, including looking at market value for the $80,000 or $90,000 that we'll be spending to renovate that building. That's one of the options. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Just pull the mic a little closer so people can hear. No, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, we got Councillor Oliver and then Brenton next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, my question relates to numbers presented on page 85, I think, under valuation of property and the highest value. I believe I read correctly that the 40 Colburn Street building is roughly 1,860 square feet, and it's generating $1,430 per month in rent. That's between the rent, reimbursement for taxes, and their portion of utilities, correct?
I'm not sure that includes utilities, but yes, certainly between taxes and rent.
Okay.
That would be correct.
Okay, and then our Cab 2 building at 1,200 square feet, roughly, would it be reasonable to think then if we went with a third-party tenant, as is one of the options, that the annual rent should be proportional? In other words, if the square footage is that much smaller, is the rent going to be that much less based on a cost per square foot? So in other words, if it's a third less, we might assume the rent would be a third less. Is that sort of the assumption that staff had made in some of their calculations?
Well, not entirely, no. Again, I don't want to negotiate in the public realm,
No,
but I
course.
would point out that the other lease was entered into some time ago.
Yes.
And our economy looked fairly different at that point in time. Norfolk has enjoyed several years of strong growth since, and that changes the basic economics of what landlords and tenants are prepared to pay and charge to each other. And beyond that, we are looking at doing a very good job worthy of the heritage building on the renovations, and that should in turn produce a very attractive building and workspace, which ought to attract an appropriate price.
And how many years has the 40 Colburn been rented to the private sector? Is it about that 8 or 9 years, i.e. at the time of the recession? Yeah, I see Marlene nodding, so.
Okay, Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. One, what is the rent on the other facility? Aren't we privileged? What is the rent? Sorry?
Isn't it in the report?
That's for the hairdresser. Okay. And is the 17,000 for that backdoor access, is that optional? Can we say that's optional? Do we have to do it now, or like I know it's flat to go in that door, but can we leave it in its existing state and not spend that money at the present? And is that included in the 72, or is that over and above?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton. The 17 for the accessible entrance is included in the 72, and it is optional. We don't have to do it, but
Okay,
it's recommended to do it.
okay, but they can access that building from the back then, right, or the west side currently?
Yes, you can.
Okay, and the other thing, something tells me, or maybe, was there not an issue with utilities over there at one time in terms of, is it not fed from this building somehow? I'm not sure if it's hydro or what it is, but it's fed from the main building here, is it not? Hydro or water or something like that?
Through the chair. I'm not sure, but I think you're right. But I don't think there's any problem with services there, like capacity.
But if, I don't real, sorry, I'm not worried about servicing it. It's a case of, it'd be metered on this building here and not on that building if it's for water or hydro or whatever
So
it is.
separate meters.
Yeah, well, no, that building is not metered for something. And again, I don't know. I remember going through that discussion at some point.
So I think Marlene's going to have to
Yeah,
check that
I
one out.
actually not sure. Now you've got me wondering too.
Okay,
I'd have to check.
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate preserving heritage buildings. I understand that we got to save the past, but to what degree, at what point does it become cost prohibitive where it doesn't make any more sense to keep sinking money into old structures? What's the criteria used? I mean, how long can the Ontario Heritage Commission or whatever it's called, foist this on a county to say, you must preserve, you must preserve, you must preserve? Is there a criteria? Up to us or is it up to them? I don't understand.
Well, actually, I'm on the Heritage Committee, and I don't believe the Heritage Committee has been involved in this at all. And if it was, if we're doing anything with the windows, the actual structure, maybe some of the brickwork, but I don't think the renovations are talking about doing anything that will affect the actual heritage aspect of the structure. I may be wrong, but should I go to you or to Marlene?
Through the These are strictly interior minor renovations, painting, flooring. There's no structural work, nothing to the heritage aspects of the building.
Okay, Mayor Luke, and then Councillor Height.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation on page 83.
Go ahead, Dad, you want to move the recommendation? And
Need a seconder.
do we have a seconder? I see a seconder for Councillor Oliver, and did you want to speak to it?
Well, if you have a question, but I certainly want to speak to it,
Okay.
yes.
Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The $72,000, so just to be clear, our county manager said it didn't include the $17,000 worth of accessibility, but it actually does?
Through the chair, yes, it does.
Okay, so what are some of the other big ticket costs in that renovation? It seems a lot of money to renovate 1,200 square feet.
Through the chair, it is high, but we have many unknowns at this time. The conditions of the walls and ceilings, they're plaster, and there's been a lot of damage over the years. So, and once you start working away at that, you don't know what you're going to find. So we have a contingency in there for that. We would be removing all the flooring, doing plaster repairs, painting, all new lighting. The lighting in there is not suitable for offices. We need to relocate some electrical conduit. The washroom needs repair, and it's got a very narrow entry, so we've removed that door, put up a drywall, proper wall with insulation. It needs new vanity and sinks, so it would need a new door and frame. We have options in there for some network drops if they need to be relocated, and a switch for the network. It's been removed. I also allowed for some optional items depending on use, because we don't know who's going in there. So it may need access control, or it may need a relocation of the security system keypad. And I've also allowed for a lunchroom counter if depending on the use of who goes in there. So it is high, but it's sort of the worst case scenario.
Okay, and you mentioned we'll be providing them with IT equipment?
Yes, the building has a network in it now because there were previous staff, but some of the equipment has been removed, so we would just update that.
And that's free?
It is, we just need a new switch, which is about $3,000. And if some of the network drops need to be relocated based on where the desks go for a new tenant, then there would be new network drops. So I allowed some money in for that, $2,000.
See, that's very nice of us. Okay, I guess my next question is the funding on the other page. It says here that we have a negative balance in the building reserve account of $402,000. So how will we fund that, Mr. Treasurer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is a negative balance as of forecast as of 2017. Our 10-year capital forecast with contributions and capital uses has a positive balance of $420,000.
I read that, but that's 10 years from now. We're looking to do this sooner. So debenture?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is definitely an option. With the reserve balances, they're constantly changing. That is the committed balance that you're looking at, is the negative 402,000 based on capital projects that are currently open. Projects close and balances change. So at the time that we do this project and the expenditures come out, then at that point we will determine if the reserve is the best choice. But at this point we are committed to use the reserve.
Okay, thank you for that. My last question, Mr. Chair, is have we passed this through our accessibility committee, and have we looked for any grant funding to recoup some of that $17,000?
Marlene, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I was just at that, and I know, I don't think there's anything being there, and I know it is accessible from the back door. So Marlene, no?
Through the chair, no, it's not accessible through the back door, and that's why the price is so high of the $17,000. If you look at the picture on page 92, you'll notice that there's a step down from the back. So inside, there's a step down. So in order to make it accessible, we would have to lower the threshold at the back door, remove the concrete sidewalk out there, and then lower all that and re-pour it. So that's why it's expensive.
Accessibility.
Okay. Have we looked at any grant funding opportunities?
No, we haven't.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the mover, Mayor Luke, and then Councillor Oliver, if you wanted to speak to it.
Yeah, I would just briefly, and I certainly read the report very carefully, and some of my questions have been answered, but I want to say in support of this, Mr. Chair, a couple of things. First of all, we have two external buildings on the front of this heritage property at Governor Simcoe Square. I think everyone would agree that the rental that we have over on the first building at the north end has been an extremely successful business adventure. It's been a benefit for a local business. It certainly is, well, your buildings seem to last longer when somebody's in them and using them and keeping them up. And I know that private money has renovated as part of the agreement over there, but if anybody hasn't been in that building where the hairdresser is, I suggest you go in, get your eyes open, because some of us around the table knew what was there and now what it is. And I am not surprised at all if you take the accessibility of 17 out, 72, and I don't know, I did the math earlier, but 52, it's about $55,000, I guess, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's not an unusual cost to renovate something that's in that condition. Mr. Baird, I believe your office was over there for a few years. I think anybody that wants to question the work that needs to be done there to bring it up, say 30, 40, 60 years, I think that you would agree that that's not out of line. It certainly, if it was occupied by the Simcoe BIA/Chamber. What a great location. What a great tenant, so that it's very visible for the public. I think it's a big win for them, but that's not what we're really concerned about here this evening. But I think the thing that sells me on this, Mr. Chair, and when I looked at the chart, I don't think the middle of the chart, around $1,000 a month, and I know that it's laid out for $800 a month all the way up to 12 or whatever it is. I don't think it's unreasonable to get $1,000 a month if we renovate that. That's $9 a square foot per year. That's extremely reasonable rent on a newly renovated downtown location. And so I think we'll have no problem at $1,000 a month. Don't know, attracting somebody. And Mr. Chair, a 7-year payback on your investment, it's not that long a time. It's not like we're looking at a 30-year debenture or mortgage here. We're looking at 7 years to start putting money in the bank. But if we don't look after those buildings, they're just going to continue inside to deteriorate. And I'm just going to support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I supported the mayor's motion in order to get it on the floor, obviously, and that's why I seconded it. But I guess I'm either puzzled or I'm concerned that the last paragraph of the recommendation omits potential use by a third-party tenant. I'm assuming staff left them out on purpose, that they felt the only options were staff internally or the BIA/Chamber of Commerce. If that's the case, then I, for one, would like to see the third-party tenant put back in as a potential option, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Cripps perhaps why there's no reference to a third-party commercial tenant.
Yeah, I'm going to demand. Go ahead.
There are two reasons for that. Firstly, it's the only of the three options. Well, from the staff perspective, it would be third choice of the three options available to council. Secondly, there is a 1975 bylaw that our precursor municipality, the town of Simcoe, passed with respect to that building. And it says that that building will be kept for, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but for government and local government use, public sector use. So this council is certainly capable of passing a bylaw that overwrites a 1975 bylaw, but as the law stands at the moment, that building can't be rented out commercially. So it would require an additional report and some steps by this council so as to be able to do so. That's not insurmountable, but for the record, that would need to happen. Really, where we're at today is to survey council to get some instruction as to whether you're content with us going forward with the renovation. It's not to make a final determination as to who might be a tenant. There are two identified parties. It's possible you might instruct us to proceed into negotiations with them. It's possible you might say, well, just fix it and we'll figure out who goes in later. We're certainly not at a point where we're able to enter into a lease today, and I couldn't tell you if you were to approve this today, ratify next week, then we could at least begin with work towards renovation, but I can't give you an exact timeline of when that'll be complete for when a potential tenant might be able to move in. So further reports would be necessary. Right now, what we're really after is the first part, is permission to begin a renovation process and approve, and for your approval for the capital expenditure. Who fills the space? We have three options, perhaps there are more than that, but would be the subject of future reporting to you.
Thank you for that, Mr. CAO and Mr. Chair. I understand what he has said. I think in light of what he has said, though, if I can get a seconder, I'm going to propose an amendment to the motion, and that amendment of the final paragraph would simply add "or a third-party commercial tenant." So the potential, at least, for a non-governmental, and I missed that, I guess, David. In other words, we would, I acknowledge, at some point in the future require a bylaw in order to do so, But I do feel at this early stage, given the fact that the BIA/Simcoe and District Chamber of Commerce may or may not be able to afford to pay market rent, I would at least like to see the market rent, i.e. third-party commercial tenant option, kept in the mix for the time being. So that's my motion, Mr. Chair, if anyone's willing to second it,
Is
as an
anyone-
amendment.
Okay, Councillor, or Mayor Luke,
I would be delighted to include that as a friendly amendment.
okay, so that's going to now form part of the main motion. So if you could include that, thank you. And then Councillor Brenton?
Well, I don't have a problem with the recommendations. My question is, I'm not, and as a council's rep on the BIA, we had several discussions, Councillor Black, as you are aware, with the current lease with the BIA and the chamber. And I'm not sure where that's at. And I guess we meet Thursday again to get some more feedback on that. But I look at it, regardless of who moves in there, that I think we would want to know the group possibly, so for the layout internally of the facility, not to go ahead and renovate it internally and then find out that maybe the third-party group that wants to rent it aren't satisfied with the layout. Perhaps they want to change that. So I'm just wondering if we are we putting the cart before the horse here? That's
Yeah, Marlene can answer that.
No?
Through the chair, there really isn't any options for layout. It's all solid concrete walls, and you wouldn't be moving them. So what we're doing is strictly cosmetic and minor repairs.
Okay, so I'm familiar with the layout inside, so you're saying there's absolutely no changes to, like the front counter will stay the same, everything, eh?
Through the chair, there is no front counter anymore. It's just wide open, and I would assume that they would just use modular furniture if they were going to, depending how it's set up.
Okay, so, all right, so that answers my question then. I support the motion.
Okay, anything further? Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? And it's carried. Thank you. Moving back on our agenda to the capital. Kathy is here. So back to number 9, staff reports. FS 1816, December 31st, 2017 capital status report. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. The capital status report before council tonight is an annual report. You've seen this a number of times. We try and do one quarterly, one at least, and an annual report at the end of the year. It provides the status of active capital projects, and for this report, it's active capital projects as of December 31st, 2017. It does not include any projects that were approved through the capital 2018 capital budget process. The listing actually provides the approved budget plus the expenditures to date and the status of the projects that are active. We currently have 214 active capital projects. The report also provides information regarding the status of these projects. In addition, with this report, it's part of our year-end budget process, or year-end process, to close projects. So what we're doing through this report is to seek council's approval to close certain projects, cancel certain projects, and to recommend funding for projects that have been overexpended. It also will recommend, there could be recommendations related to changing the source of fundings. For example, if we had received additional donations, it'll request a recommendation to accept those donations and fund the project from the amounts that we've received. If the table on page 2 of the report outlines the status of all the projects that we're canceling approximately 78 projects. Of the 78 projects being, canceled and closed because they've been completed, there's a savings of approximately $7.8 million in funding that we have not used. And it's offset by over expenditures of $270,000. So that's actually good news for the status of the closed projects. We still do have 136 projects open as of the end of December 31st, 2017, with a total value of just over $82 million. It was last year that, the end of 2016, we actually, I believe, closed approximately 183 projects. So we diligently worked with staff and closed many projects. We went from 338 open projects to 214. We did the same again this year. We're closing an additional 78 projects, as mentioned earlier. So we are working closely between financial services staffs and the project managers to actively get the projects completed and close them on a timely basis. So what we've worked individually with all the project managers. There are maybe a few projects within the within the listing that we've recommended to stay open. They may be substantially completed, but for various reasons we needed to leave them open. But they will be closed shortly. You will be receiving another report. It probably will be as of May 31st, and it will include the 2018 projects also. So at that time, you'll see some of these older projects be recommended to close at that time. I can answer any questions council has. If they're specific to projects, the general managers are also here to provide any additional information or answer any of your questions.
Okay, questions from committee? And I see Councillor Oliver, Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's a quick one, Kathy, and I know you said it, but you glossed over it too quickly, and you shouldn't have. You said of the closed and canceled projects, we had underexpended by how many millions?
Through the chair, we actually canceled projects totaling a savings of approximately 5.2 million.
5.2 million,
Yes.
thank you.
And we closed projects that were within budget of 1.9 million for a total of 7.1.
Right, 1.9
Yeah.
and 7 and 5.2, okay.
That's correct.
And we've overexpended by a very small amount, 400 and plus thousand, I think you said?
We overexpended in the table on page 2. It's part of the bottom tab, or the last column.
Right.
It shows we've overexpended projects of approximately 270,000.
Okay, yep. So in reality then, I guess, to you, Kathy, and or the treasurer, does that represent a real saving, if you like, to Norfolk County of the difference between that, that 7 million and roughly 300,000? Are those real dollars in any sense, or just dollars on a ledger sheet?
Through the chair, for the projects that were recommended to be closed, I would say that they're either, if the funding was from debt, we don't have to issue as much debt. If they were funded from the reserve or reserve funds, yes, that money will not be withdrawn from the reserves and reserve funds, so it will have a positive effect on the reserve. For the projects that are canceled, that's a little bit more difficult to answer because the projects are canceled for various reasons. They may be rebudgeted in 2018 because they became part of a larger project, or there are some projects that truly are no longer required. So that the part of the 5.2 is a little more difficult to answer.
Mr. Chair, I think that part of the report is encouraging news for us, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you. On page 38, I have one thank you for Waterford Waste.
That microphone.
Waterford Wastewater Treatment Plant on page 38, number 190. We approved this 5 years ago to the tune of 12 million. What has the figure risen to now?
Kathy, do you know what that, is it the same or is it more?
Through the chair, I'm not, maybe James will be able to help with this. I'm not 100% familiar with this project, but I believe this is one that was tendered not too long ago, and it came in quite much higher than this. This is based on before the tender, because it was just tendered this March, I believe, of 2018. So the information in the report is the budget as it stands right now.
David, do you want to add?
Council will recall closed session discussions on this topic a few weeks back. You will recall that an RFP has been issued. You will recall that we are in a blackout period. You will recall that we're going to stop discussing this now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You- Okay. You're too busy making a football. Mayor Luke?
Councillor Sonnenberg, through the chair, you know he's not our first choice for chairperson. You know that. He's the substitute. So please keep that in mind as the evening unfolds.
Second stringer.
Our chair is away on business. Just a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to see 78 of these will come off the list, and there's still 136. I've got a couple of questions on page 33. First of all, I see, Mr. Chair, I see Mr. Cridlin sitting there this evening, ready to answer my question. I want to find out where or what we're going to be doing with the Normandale property. As you know, in '09, I believe it was April of '09, the dam burst. And we started in 2011 looking at purchasing, not purchasing, getting deeded to the county that property down by the pier and the parkland. Do you know, here we are now, several years later, what is the holdup if in fact we are going to be taking over that park area along the creek there going into the lake?
Bill?
Through the chair to Mayor Luke. I can say it's an interesting process, working with and it's not a derogatory thing, but working with the province.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that this has been or will shortly fall in the lap of Nicholas Loeb in-house to do some of this work. And that's about all the details I have it now. It's very detailed, trying to get land from the province, and fortunately, that's about the best I can do. It is tied up legally, and we're hoping with Nicholas on board, we'll be able to get somewhere with this shortly, a yes or no answer on where we're moving, because you're right, it has been there for a number of years.
And again, we spent $7,500 roughly, and we've budgeted 27. So the other question on that, through the chair, Mr. Krillin, who is currently emptying the garbage cans on that site and cutting the grass? Is it M&R or is it the county?
Through the chair to Mayor Luke, I believe it is community services staff.
Oh. Okay.
Glad you asked.
Well, I thought I had seen a white truck down there. The residents are happy with the service, but
Maybe we can bill M&R.
Anyhow. Well, I won't say any more. Okay, I asked, I got the answer. Skateboard, just above it, through Mr. Chair, skateboard park ramp replacement phase 3. Is that entirely the Simcoe skateboard, that budget amount that's been going over a number of phases? Is that solely the wooden ramps at the fairgrounds?
Through the chair to Mayor Luke, yes, that is the Simcoe spot alone.
Good, and Mr. Chair, I had seen them last week before the snowstorm, before winter. I'd seen them last week when there were a crew working on them, so thank you. The last question I have, and I like to look at the ones that are, 5, 6 years old, the street light tower replacements, and maybe without Lee here, I don't know, but I know we're nearing the end of this, but I guess that's just an ongoing amount of capital money that we have. And I would think that hopefully this year that item would be cleared up there. We spent 51 of 76. It says estimated completion 28. I assume that's streetlight tower replacements all over the county, or is that a community service ballpark item? I don't know.
Through the chair to Mayor Luke, that is a community services initiative. Started well back in 2013, looking at all the steel lights in our ball diamonds.
Okay.
And what staff have did with that so far has kind of been a Hadcock or a fixing as needed sort of thing. And I think if you will remember, in the 2018 budget, we did put another capital budget in for the Dell highlights. So looking at these, it's much bigger project. We need to look at each diamond, and we're going to budget each diamond going forward in the future. We've got an engineer who has kind of give us timelines on what should be replaced and what's needed. So this here, as Kathy had spoken, we'll probably see one you will see closed out in May. The fact that we moved on with individual budgets for each park.
Okay, and we're going on to Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kathy. Kathy, I see we basically completed around 23 million like with the ones recommended over budget and within budget. So would you say, I know I asked you for the report for last year's capital status report, and we're averaging rating around there every single year as far as our ability goes to finish projects. Would you say that's a fair assumption of what the staff are capable of completing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll answer this one. That's a very difficult question to ask. It all depends on the projects. You can have 5 projects that can be completed within 6 months, and that'll skew the numbers. And you can have one project like a wastewater treatment plant that can take 12 to 15 months to complete. So that's a bit of a hard question to answer.
So then, but overall, I think average, when you look back, that's roughly where we come in at. But yet, we're still looking at capital projects of $40 million every year. So all we can ever do is fall behind. How do we fix that problem? Besides hiring new staff?
Through the chair, I think one of the items that I mentioned in the report was that a large portion of the projects relate to water and wastewater that have been on our books for a number of years. And as a go-forward basis, there's not as many larger wastewater projects. So I think when you see those completed, you'll see the overall capital, the outstanding balances being reduced. So I just, like James said, it is very difficult to determine what the average it is. But just from the number of projects being reduced, you could see that we are working to reduce the number of projects, and they're getting completed faster. Even if we are keeping the same amount of projects, the number of projects are being completed much quicker. It's the large dollar projects that take a number of years, and they stay on our books for a number of years. And once you see them fall off our books, then I think you'll see a large change.
Okay, maybe it's beneficial that we separate out those large projects from this report to track the smaller ones. But you mentioned that there was a report coming back in May. Will that be on our action item list?
Just to clarify, it won't be coming back in May. The report will probably come back in late June or early July, and it'll be as of May 31st. So what we do is we have a cutoff, and then we have to work with all the various departments in order to get an updated status on all these reports, and that takes quite a few weeks to pull it all together and then present it to council.
Got it. And will that be on our action list? You got that? Thank you. I have a few specific questions for some of these projects, and my big concerns is the dates. I'm looking here, and just even on item number 5, CRM, customer service, phase 1, 2014, 200 grand has been sitting on there, and right now under the status comments, it says here the council report is threatening to come in Q2 2018. This is 4 years in the making. Maybe we should just cancel this project and rethink it or something. Like, I have a long list of these things to go through, and some of them are so old. I'd like updates on why they're just not getting done. If it's useless to us, let's delete it. This has been hanging around for 4 years, and there's been zero movement, $0. I don't see a use for it myself.
James or David?
On the bigger question as to what you cancel and how you want to deal with these long-term planning projects, I make no specific submissions on that item in particular. I spent some time this morning writing part of a customer service report that will be coming to council prior to any official lame duck status it may or may not acquire on July 27th for your consideration. I would ask you to possibly, it's just a placeholder, it's not actual money at this point in time, but to not delete that, or of course it'll come with a different ask to reinstate it, possibly subject to reconsideration at that point in time. So there is something coming to deal with that specifically.
Okay, I'll keep that one on there. Now, if we move down to 13, we have accessible play space, the ground surface, Delcrest Park, Delhi. In 2016, this was approved. We spent $336. Why can't we build a park?
Is that for you, Bill? Or Shelley?
Through the chair, this project was initiated, however, we placed it on hold because we submitted a grant application, which we were successful in achieving, and the playground construction will happen this year with grant funding, and this particular project will be completed at that time. So we held it because of a grant.
How much was the grant for that we did receive?
Through the chair, I'm trying to recall, but I think it was $50,000. I think we got the maximum funding allocation.
Nice, good to hear that. Number 22 under Public Works, bought a photocopier here, had a budget of $17,000, got it for $61.82. That's either a great sale or some budget padding. I hope the rest of our photocopiers come in at that price. And now, also under Public Works, there are a ton of trucks. There's trucks, 3/4 ton vans, there's half-ton pickups, 1 tons, tractors with arms, roads east. These are 2016 and 17 projects, so I'm of the mind that we don't actually need them, because when council approves something and the money doesn't get spent, if you don't spend it, we have the option to take it away. But I do see that they are currently performing a thorough review of all fleet vehicles. When will said review be complete? And can we get that on the action item list?
It's before. I know you made a comment about budget padding, and I don't believe our staff does that. So go ahead, David.
Yes, I will agree that the staff does not intentionally budget pad, for the record. I can't tell you the exact month that fleet report is coming. The general manager is not present at the moment. I can tell you we have had discussions on that topic within the last 6, maybe 7 weeks. I know it is a work in progress. I'm sorry I can't give you the exact date for that right now. I will follow up with an email in the coming days to give you a better ETA.
Okay. My next one is number 45, Old Hill Road, Cedar Drive to Front Road on Turkey Point. Was approved in 2015. Still sitting there. Should we not just cancel that project? I'm not sure that road needs a full rebuild. Maybe the councillor of the area could comment on it for me?
Staff comment, and then I can go to the counselor. What staff would comment on that?
Can I just suggest, this is not the purpose of a capital status report, to go through line by line and to do a deep dive. In the event any member of council wants to do a deep dive on an item, the two appropriate ways are to telegraph that ahead of time so staff can prepare proper answers for you, or more appropriately, bring a notice of motion to do reports on the given issues. This is a widespread overview of how we plan to spend money and have planned for a number of years looking forward across all areas of the corporation. We don't come equipped to do deep dives on any one individual item, and we're kind of getting lost in the weeds on this. May I strongly suggest you take a high overview look. If you want to give us some instruction about analytical process and looking at what metrics we should use to try to streamline or curtail a list of approved projects, that's an entirely reasonable and appropriate action. But right now, the last 3 or 4 questions, the answers have been, we'll get back to you, we'll look at that, because that's not what we're here to do today on this item. That's not what this exercise is. So may I please try to encourage council to just take a look overall at the capital status as a sort of thematic. And if there's specific issues that are of interest to you, we will, of course, address them. We work for you, but we're really not prepared to do a very deep dive today. And you're seeing that in the answers, which aren't as specific as we normally attempt to give to you. Thank you.
Yes, and I would concur with CAO. Maybe I should have emphasized that the fact is we have approved all these capital expenditures, and this traditionally is a capital status report. And just as the Chief Administrative Officer indicated, it is high level. I concur completely. If there are details, councilors should be meeting with staff either before or after to get some of those detailed issues resolved. So can we stay on the higher end of this, more general nature? So Councillor Height, is there anything else that you would have? Okay, then we'll move on to Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think my question is